When you click on a video, your brain reacts before you even realize it. There's a chemical released inside your head. It's called dopamine. This isn't just about feeling good. Dopamine is what drives you to act, to chase, to repeat. The moment that content appears on screen, your brain records it, not as just an image or a scene, but as a reward. The more you watch, the more it fires. It teaches you, this is good, do it again. But here's the catch. The brain doesn't like balance. It wants novelty, not the same video, not the same scene. Something new. Each new clip becomes a trigger, a fresh hit, another reward. The brain doesn't just tolerate novelty, it becomes dependent on it. With every session, the threshold rises. What used to satisfy no longer works. You keep scrolling, keep switching tabs, searching, clicking, again and again. Because the pleasure isn't in the content, it's in the pursuit. That's what dopamine does. It doesn't reward achievement, it rewards anticipation. And that's the trap. What you're chasing is not the thing itself. It's the feeling that something better is just one click away. Over time, the baseline shifts. What once gave you a rush now barely registers. That's called desensitization. The brain adjusts. It builds tolerance. It starts needing more stimulation to feel the same level of excitement. But it doesn't stop there. The natural rewards, connection, conversation, small joys, they lose impact. Food tastes dull. Nature feels distant. Real intimacy becomes complicated. Because now, your brain has recalibrated. It compares everything to artificial peaks. It no longer responds to ordinary life. That's why quitting feels so difficult. You're not just stopping a habit. You're rewiring a system. You've taught your brain to link a screen with satisfaction. You've trained it to expect instant reward. That association becomes automatic. You feel bored, open a tab. You feel stressed, find a video. You feel tired, anxious, lost. There's always something to distract you. But here's the part most people miss. You're not in control of this process. You think you're choosing, you think you're deciding. But the impulse fires before the thought. The decision happens after the desire. That's how addiction works. Not as a conscious choice, but as a loop. Cue, craving, response, reward, repeat. The loop doesn't ask what you value. It doesn't care about your goals. It only knows what's been repeated. The more you respond to the urge, the stronger it becomes. The brain learns through repetition. Not truth. Not meaning. Just frequency. And what's worse, each time you act, the path gets easier. The neurons that fire together wire together. You're literally building a faster route from trigger to action. So next time, it takes less effort, less thought. Eventually, it becomes automatic. And that's the real cost. Not just wasted time, not just fleeting pleasure, but autonomy. The ability to choose. Lost to a cycle you no longer notice. This is the point where willpower fails. Because willpower works on the surface. Addiction works underneath. It speaks in emotion, in impulse, in memory, not in reason. You can't argue with a brain that's been trained to chase novelty every time it's uncomfortable. You can't reason with a system that's rewarded chaos over calm. This isn't weakness, it's programming. And porn is the perfect teacher. Because it doesn't run out. It doesn't require effort, or risk, or connection. It offers infinite novelty, delivered instantly, rewarded consistently, no challenge, no failure, just escape. But that kind of repetition has a cost. It damages your ability to wait, to focus, to act with intent. You lose patience. You lose discipline. You lose sensitivity to reality. You begin needing more to feel less. And when nothing else gives you the same spark, the world starts to feel empty. Not because it is, but because you've trained yourself to expect fireworks. And real life doesn't come with that kind of explosion, so you return to the screen. Because it's easy. Because it works. Because your brain now believes it's the only source of pleasure left. This is not a moral argument. It's not about shame or judgment, it's about understanding what's happening. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's seeking reward, it's avoiding discomfort, it's reinforcing what gets repeated. But just because the system makes sense doesn't mean it's working for you. The question isn't whether you feel good in the moment. The question is whether you're in control. Because if your brain chooses before you do, then who's really making the decision? And if every decision brings you further away from discipline, from focus, from meaning, then maybe this isn't freedom. Maybe this is just a cage with no bars. And the worst part? You built it yourself. It usually begins with interest, a glance. Maybe out of boredom, maybe from curiosity. You see something once and it leaves a mark. You remember where to find it. You go back. The second time feels easier. The hesitation disappears. You don't think about it, you just follow the urge. There's no decision being made, just a habit being shaped. Slowly, repetition builds the pattern. The more often you return, the faster your mind reaches for it. It becomes automatic, not because it's needed, but because it's been repeated. That's the cycle. You didn't plan for it, you didn't expect it. But it forms anyway. You find yourself there again. Same screen, same search, same instant response. It doesn't matter if you said you wouldn't. The thought comes and you follow it. It's easy to call it a choice. It looks like one, but it doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like a script, one that keeps playing. At first, what you watch is enough, but it fades. The content that worked yesterday doesn't work today. So you scroll longer. You look for something else. You open more tabs. You search for something more specific. The brain wants variation. It wants surprise. When the old videos stop triggering the same response, the mind looks for novelty. That's how escalation begins. You don't think you're changing, but the material shifts. Slowly, you begin clicking things you once ignored. You move past categories you used to skip. It's not shocking anymore, it's just normal. And that shift doesn't reverse. Once you've seen more extreme content, everything before it seems dull. The brain adapts. It always wants the next step. It becomes less about what you're watching and more about finding something new. The chase replaces the result. You're no longer interested in satisfaction. You're addicted to seeking. It stops being about pleasure. It becomes about habit. You open the browser without thinking. You click without pause. You don't know why. You just do. That's how compulsive behavior develops. From repetition, from reward, from automatic loops the mind doesn't question. And while that happens, something else is changing. You start choosing comfort over control. Each time you escape discomfort, you reinforce it. Each time you avoid stress by watching something, you make the connection stronger. Soon everything becomes a trigger: frustration, boredom, silence, a bad day, an awkward moment. You turn to the screen because it works. But that's not freedom. Freedom means choice. It means acting with purpose, not reacting out of habit. But when behavior repeats itself without conscious thought, you're not choosing anymore. You're reacting. That's the part most people ignore. The brain doesn't care if something is healthy. It only cares if it works. If the habit reduces discomfort, the brain reinforces it. And it does this quietly, repeatedly. The reward loop doesn't measure long-term impact. It only measures short-term relief. It trains you to reach for escape again and again, so you live with the illusion of freedom. You can access anything, anytime. You can stop whenever you want. You can switch it off. You tell yourself this every time. But access doesn't mean control. Just because you can click anything doesn't mean you're choosing what's best. Just because something is available doesn't make it harmless. That's modern slavery. It's not chains. It's not someone forcing your hand. It's internal. It's built from within. The platform doesn't restrict you, but the habit does. It traps your mind into repetition. It rewards passivity. It removes your need to act with effort. And the more often you follow it, the more automatic it becomes. There's no resistance anymore, just action, without thought, without question. And you carry that weight into everything else. Tasks feel longer. Focus becomes harder. Satisfaction disappears. Not because the world changed, but because your baseline shifted. You've taught your brain to expect stimulation on demand. You've conditioned yourself to expect intensity in every moment. But life doesn't match that speed. Real relationships take time. Growth is slow. Progress is boring. So everything else feels empty. Not exciting enough, not fast enough. And in that gap, the habit returns. Because it fills the silence. It removes the need for patience. It gives you exactly what you want now. But this isn't control. And Epictetus said it clearly. No man is free who is not master of himself. Mastery isn't avoiding temptation. It's recognizing it and choosing not to follow. It means seeing the urge rise and not obeying it. It means making the hard decision when the easy one is right in front of you. But none of that can happen while the pattern remains invisible. If you think you're free because you're not being forced, you're missing the point. You don't need someone else to control you. You can lose freedom on your own. Through routine, through reward, through behavior you never question. And it looks harmless. Because the world says it is, but the price isn't always loud. It's quiet. It shows up in what you can't focus on anymore, in what no longer satisfies you, in the discomfort you run from every day. The screen gives you relief, but it also takes something. It removes the resistance, and without resistance you can't grow. You can't build strength if you always choose escape. You can't think clearly if you're always reacting, and you can't be free if you're always following the path of least effort. So the question isn't whether the habit feels good. The question is whether you control it, or it controls you. Because if something can push you to act without choice, then you're not leading your life. You're following a script, one that was built in silence, repeated in private, and never questioned. Until now. 2,000 years ago, 3 men saw the world in a way most people still can't. One was a Roman emperor, the second a playwright, the third a former slave. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. They lived in different cities, held different roles, but they all reached the same conclusion. That peace comes from discipline, not comfort. That freedom isn't found in what you own or how much you consume, but in how little you need. They called it Stoicism, a way of thinking built around one principle: control what is in your hands, ignore what isn't. For them, the outside world was noise. Power, wealth, praise, temporary. All of it could be taken away. But the mind, that was yours. They believed your reactions mattered more than your circumstances. Pain could be faced. Desire could be tamed. Anger could be managed. Through reason, through action, through habit. And at the center of it all was mastery. Not over others, but over yourself. That was the highest goal. To train your thoughts. To guide your choices. To stand still in the middle of chaos, untouched by what you can't change. Now compare that to modern habits, especially the ones built around instant reward. You don't need effort. You don't need patience. You don't need discipline. You just need a screen. And a moment. Content is endless. Novelty is free. Nothing asks anything from you except your attention, but that's the catch. You give up focus. You give up time. You give up control. You might feel like you're choosing, but it's not really a choice if the pattern makes it for you. That's not stoic. That's submission. When you open a new tab, your brain lights up. Dopamine floods in. That's chemistry. But the Stoics warned against chasing pleasure without thought. Because they knew something most people ignore. The more pleasure you seek, the more control you lose. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Need creates weakness. Dependence creates instability. If your peace comes from something outside you, then you're never really in charge. Epictetus taught this early. He was born a slave, but he said the body could be owned, his mind could not. He wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If that's true, then freedom today is rare. Because for many people, control has shifted. Not to a government or a ruler, but to a habit. It's small, quiet, hidden, but powerful. Every time you give into it, you trade your will for a reward. Not because you need it, but because your mind has been taught to expect it. The Stoics would call that a failure of discipline. They weren't against pleasure, they were against being ruled by it. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man in the world at the time, wrote notes to himself. Not about victory or legacy, but about resisting comfort, facing pain, keeping calm. He didn't write them for others. He wrote them to stay grounded, to keep his mind clear. He reminded himself daily that the world would challenge him, that people would annoy him, that life would be unfair, but he could still control his choices. He could still respond with reason. That was strength. Today it's easy to forget that. Because you're told to chase what feels good, to avoid boredom, to entertain yourself constantly, and the tools make it easy. You can scroll forever. You can watch anything. You can escape every single time discomfort appears. But what does that build? Not resilience, not courage, not patience. It builds habit. It teaches your brain to expect reward without effort. And it weakens your ability to sit with silence, to act without impulse, to choose discomfort on purpose. The Stoics trained for that. Seneca would practice poverty. He'd wear rough clothes, eat simple food, sleep on the floor, not because he had to, but because he didn't want comfort to control him. He said, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" He was removing fear by facing it, training the mind to need less. Porn does the opposite. It teaches the mind to crave more, expect more, require more. Not because it adds something to your life, but because it takes away the ability to live without it. That's not strength. That's dependence. Stoicism asks a different question, not "what do I want right now?" but "what am I becoming through what I repeat?" Because what you do often becomes what you are. And if you're always acting on urge, then who's really in control? Every click is a choice. Every choice is a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. The Stoics believed character wasn't built in big moments. It was shaped in small ones, resisting a thought, holding back a word, choosing action when it's easier to wait. That's philosophy, not as an idea, but as practice. You don't quit habits through motivation. You replace them through discipline. You don't control your mind through force. You shape it through training. And Stoicism offers that path. Not because it's old, but because it still works. It doesn't matter that Marcus wrote his notes on parchment, or that Epictetus taught in courtyards. What matters is they understood human behavior, and they knew that most of our problems come from within. Distraction, desire, fear, and the only way to overcome them is to master ourselves. Not through theory, but through action. So the question is simple: are you leading your mind, or is something else leading it for you? Because freedom isn't doing what you want. It's being able to say no to what you don't. And that starts with training, just like the Stoics did. Today, freedom is sold as choice. You can pick what to watch, where to go, what to say, who to follow. If there's a craving, it can be satisfied. If there's an itch, it can be scratched. Almost instantly. And this is praised as progress. But when you look closer, the picture changes. Because just being able to click anything doesn't mean you're in control. It just means you have access. And access without limits doesn't lead to peace. It leads to noise. The Stoics saw this long ago. To them, freedom wasn't doing whatever you wanted. It was doing what was right, regardless of what you felt. The modern world tells you the opposite. That freedom is acting on desire. Stoicism says freedom is being able to ignore desire. There's a clear difference. The man who chases every impulse can say he's free. But watch him closely. He can't sit still. He can't pause. He's pulled by every urge, every trigger, every thought. He isn't guiding his behavior is guiding him. That's not freedom, that's dependence. You can dress it up in different words. You can call it self-expression, or pleasure, or just a personal choice. But if you can't say no, then it isn't a choice anymore. Epictetus explained this with clarity. He said, the real prison is not outside. It's in the mind that can't resist itself. If something outside of you can pull you to act without your permission, you're not free. You're owned by the urge. Now think about how that works with something like porn. It seems harmless. You can watch it or not, you can open a tab or close it, no one's forcing you, you tell yourself you're choosing. But the habit was built long before you started noticing it. The urge appears. You act. The pattern repeats. You feel like you're leading, but you're not. You're reacting. And every time that loop runs, it gets stronger. So what started as a decision becomes a routine. Not planned, not examined, just repeated. You give up resistance. You give up effort. You give up control. And this is called freedom. But it isn't. Real freedom is when you can face an urge and not obey it. When you can sit with discomfort and not run from it. When you can choose what's right over what's easy. That's where discipline enters. Discipline is not restriction, it's power. It gives you the strength to say no, not just once, but every time the pull comes back. It's not about being rigid, it's about being in charge. Seneca wrote about this often. He said that the man who is ruled by pleasure becomes its servant. And once you serve something, you're no longer free. That applies directly to how the mind handles porn. Because with each repetition, your threshold changes. The mind expects more, it pushes for more. You don't even feel like you're deciding, you're just following. And in that following, you lose the ability to choose differently. That's what slavery looks like now. Not chains, not force, but habits that run without your input. The screen offers freedom, but it delivers dependence. And the most dangerous part, you don't see it happening. Because you're told it's normal, you're told it's healthy, you're told it's your right. So when it weakens your attention, you ignore it. When it dulls your motivation, you excuse it. When it replaces real connection, you avoid thinking about it. Because the story is that you're free. But if you can't sit with silence, if you can't go a day without stimulation, if you can't stop even when you want to, then who's in charge? You or the urge? The Stoics warned against this exact loss of self. They believed that every action either builds your strength or steals from it. There's no neutral step, and every time you surrender to impulse, you make it easier to do so again. That's not a one-time decision. That's a life pattern. And once that pattern locks in, breaking it feels impossible. But the first step is seeing it. Calling it what it is, not choice, not pleasure, not lifestyle, but submission. It's the same pattern that traps a person in debt, in addiction, in destructive behavior. They all start the same way, small, easy, harmless. But they end the same way too, with control lost. Marcus Aurelius said that the most powerful man is the one who has power over himself. No status, no wealth, just inner rule. That's the Stoic paradox. Discipline creates freedom, not because it removes options, but because it protects you from your own impulses. When you say no to something destructive, you're not limiting yourself. You're protecting your ability to choose later. Because every yes to comfort is often a no to growth, and every unchecked habit takes something from your future. So what's more free? Opening a screen because the urge says so? Or walking away and keeping your attention, your time, your mind? Freedom isn't what feels good in the moment, it's what builds strength over time. And only discipline can offer that. Not because it's easy, but because it's lasting. When you're no longer pulled by cravings, no longer led by emotion, no longer trapped by habits, you're finally free. Not because you consume anything, but because you can walk away from everything. That's the freedom Stoicism defends. And that's the freedom worth building. What makes a man act before thinking? What makes him repeat the same behavior even after regret? The answer usually isn't found in what he does, but in what he avoids. Modern habits are shaped by escape. You don't face boredom, you scroll. You don't sit with discomfort, you numb it, and most people aren't even aware they're doing it. They just react. Repetition becomes routine. Routine becomes identity. But the Stoics practiced something different. Instead of avoiding discomfort, they observed it. Instead of reacting, they paused. Not once, but every day. Through self-examination, through writing, through asking the hard questions no one else would. Seneca taught that without reflection, life becomes automatic. Not lived, but consumed. One moment taken over by the next, without pause. He didn't see journaling as a way to record events. He saw it as a mirror, a method to track the self without lies, without filters. Every night, Seneca asked himself the same thing. Where did I fall short today? What could I have done better? What did I avoid facing? These weren't casual thoughts. They were daily evaluations, and they weren't shared with others, they were written to keep the mind clear. He knew that you can't change what you refuse to face. So apply that now. The question isn't whether porn is harmful in a vague sense. That's easy to say. The question is personal. What are you avoiding when you open that tab? What's pushing you to repeat that act, again and again? What thought are you blocking out? What emotion are you pushing down? For many, it's boredom. For others, it's anxiety. Some use it to escape loneliness. Some use it to feel in control. But if you never pause to ask, you'll never know. And if you never know, you'll never stop. Because without understanding, change is just guesswork. The Stoics had a word for this. Know thyself. It wasn't just advice. It was a requirement for a good life. If you don't know your mind, someone else will. If you don't lead your thoughts, your habits will. So you ask, and you write. Not with judgment, just with clarity. What triggers the urge? What patterns repeat? What emotion comes before the action? What story are you telling yourself that justifies it? That process is where freedom starts. Because once a pattern is seen, it can be broken. But if it stays hidden, it stays in control. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." You can't fix what you haven't looked at. So you look, you don't hide from it. You bring it into light, not to feel bad, but to take responsibility. Now, the Stoics didn't stop at reflection. They also prepared. They used a mental practice called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. They visualized struggle before it came, not to feel fear, but to train for it. So when the urge did appear, they weren't surprised. They were ready. Marcus Aurelius would picture rude people before leaving his home. Seneca would imagine loss and discomfort in the morning before the day began. They knew the storm was coming. They just didn't wait for it to arrive before strengthening the mind. You can apply the same. You know the urge is coming. So ask yourself now, not when it hits. What will I do when it comes? What will I think? What will I remind myself of? Will I just hope to resist? Or will I prepare? Hope is not a plan. Willpower is not infinite, but training is. You can't avoid every craving, but you can choose how you meet it. Instead of distraction, you observe it. Instead of panic, you breathe. Instead of reacting, you recall what matters. That's Stoicism. It's not about pretending urges don't exist. It's about being stronger than them. Not occasionally, but consistently. And it starts with knowing your own patterns. You don't need to change everything in a day, but you do need to be honest. With yourself, with your routines, with what you allow. And that honesty comes through writing. Not once, but daily. What did I do today that made me weaker? What did I do today that made me stronger? What behavior did I regret? What triggered it? What will I do differently next time? You don't need a full hour. 5 minutes of truth is more useful than days of avoidance. Because each written word is a mirror. Each question forces you to look, not away, but inward. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery in this case isn't grand. It's not dramatic. It's just the act of not lying to yourself, of facing the discomfort of self-examination. Because once you understand what you're running from, you can stop running, and when you stop running, you can start rebuilding. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is direction. You know what the urge looks like. You've seen the pattern. Now ask, what would a man in control do? He would watch the urge rise. He wouldn't panic. He wouldn't run. He'd let it pass and return to what he chose to value. And that's something you can train, not once, not only when you're strong, but every day, even when you feel weak. That's how mastery is built. It begins by observing, it continues by planning, and it's repeated through habit. Not passive habit, but intentional, chosen, tested. Every time you pause instead of react, you move closer. Every time you ask a better question, the answer shapes your next step. And slowly, what felt automatic begins to lose its hold. Because you've seen it, named it, trained for it. You're no longer confused. And that, for the Stoics, was the beginning of freedom. Picture a man who wants to change, not in theory, in practice. He's tired of being pulled by the same impulse day after day. But knowledge isn't enough. Quotes don't build discipline. And without real tools, the cycle stays the same. The Stoics understood this. They didn't just talk about virtue, they trained for it every day, using clear methods, direct actions, mental habits. The first was called negative visualization. It sounds strange, but the point was simple. Instead of imagining success, imagine failure. Instead of visualizing what you want, picture what will happen if you keep going the way you are. Not for drama, for clarity. What happens if you keep watching? Not just once, but repeatedly. How does it shape your attention, your energy, your relationships? 5 years from now, where will that pattern lead? 10 years from now, what will it cost? The mind doesn't change without pressure. The Stoics applied that pressure themselves. They looked at the worst-case scenario, not to feel fear, but to prepare. Now apply it here. If the urge wins again and again, what does that build? Not just in behavior, but in the kind of person you become, because no habit stays small. Every choice feeds a pattern, and every pattern forms identity. So instead of waiting for regret to wake you up, use imagination. Play it out. Every time. before the act. Let the long-term cost be more real than the short-term comfort. Then there's another tool, voluntary discomfort. You don't get stronger by reading about strength. You get stronger by doing hard things, not when you're forced, but by choice. The Stoics practiced this on purpose. They fasted, they slept without comfort, they stood in cold weather, they limited luxury. The goal wasn't to suffer, it was to train. When you choose discomfort regularly, you build a gap between impulse and action. You become familiar with saying no. You stop needing everything to feel easy. Modern habit research confirms this. In Atomic Habits, James Clear explains that successful change depends on identity-based habits. You don't just act differently, you become the kind of person who acts differently. But that shift begins with action, not belief. You wake up and take the cold shower, not because it feels good, but because you said you would. You don't check your phone first thing, you take a walk instead. You go a day without internet just to prove you can. Each choice doesn't look like much, but together, they shape identity. You're no longer the person who needs comfort, you're the one who chooses direction. And that leads to the next tool, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus taught that some things are up to us and others are not. That sounds obvious, but it's often forgotten. You can't stop an urge from showing up. It will come, maybe often. But what you do after, that's yours. That's where freedom exists. You can't remove the thought, but you don't have to act on it. You can't erase the craving, but you can let it pass. Trying to control urges directly will fail. But controlling response, that's a skill. One you build every time you pause. Every time you wait. Every time you say, not now. That doesn't mean you suppress. It means you observe. Without judgment, without panic. Just watch the thought rise and fall, like a wave. And then you return to what matters. Because action isn't random, it's shaped by environment. That's where habit science connects again. Clear explains that behavior follows cues. If the trigger is removed, the action fades. If it's present, the pattern continues. So change your setup, remove easy access, set filters, move devices, add delay. You don't rely on willpower, you design around weakness. The Stoics would call this living in agreement with nature, knowing your tendencies and working with them, not against them. You know when you're weakest. You know where temptation strikes. Prepare for it before it comes. That's wisdom. Make the good choice easier. Make the bad one harder. And reward isn't always needed. The act of choosing well is the reward. Because each time you resist, you prove to yourself that you can. That proof adds up. And when it's repeated, it becomes identity. You're no longer avoiding something. You're becoming someone. That's how real change works. Not overnight, not by emotion, but by repetition. The Stoics didn't wait for motivation. They built systems. They examined their mind. They faced discomfort. They prepared for challenge. And they focused only on what they could control. That system still works. It doesn't matter what the impulse is. Porn, food, distraction. The method stays the same. You train, you act, you repeat. And with each act, you grow into a person who doesn't need to be told what's right. You already know. And more importantly, you live it. A man can stop a habit. But if he leaves a gap, it pulls him back. Nature doesn't allow emptiness. If you remove something, something else moves in. This is why quitting isn't enough. If you stop porn but don't replace it, the craving waits. The habit doesn't vanish. It shifts. It returns when you're tired, bored, or distracted. So the Stoics didn't just remove bad impulses. They filled time with action. Purposeful action. Epictetus didn't waste time debating what was good. He said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Don't talk about change, become it. Don't say what matters, live it. That's how the Stoics handled weakness, not with theory, with motion. So what replaces the old urge? That same energy can move the body, it can build strength, it can focus the mind. You take what once pulled you down and redirect it toward something useful, something chosen. Start with effort, physical effort, exercise, lifting, training, anything that builds resistance. Porn is ease. It offers reward without input. Movement gives return only after pain, and that's the point. You teach yourself again that satisfaction must be earned. Then there's skill. Building something. writing, learning code, playing music, fixing a problem. When you do that, you're not just distracted, you're progressing. Each session compounds. What was once escape becomes creation. Time that was spent numbing is now used growing. The Stoics believed that action tied to virtue was the highest form of living. Not just being good, but being useful, being strong, reliable, honest, calm under stress, focused when others drift. That's a man you can respect. That's a life you don't want to escape. So you don't just quit porn, you replace it. With responsibility, with movement, with goals. It won't feel the same. But that's not the goal. The goal isn't dopamine. The goal is direction. That's how the Stoics saw pleasure. Not as evil, but as a byproduct of a good life, not the reason for living. You do meaningful work not for reward, but because it's worth doing. You connect deeply with others not to feel good, but to build something real. You train your body not for vanity, but to be ready. And slowly, pleasure returns. But not like before. Not cheap, not instant, earned. There's something else. You track your progress, not with streaks, but with effort. What did I build today? Where did I focus? What grew? That's how you know the change is working, not by what you resist, but by what you replace. Porn offers nothing, it's quick, it's empty, it leaves no trace of value. But purpose leaves a mark. Not just in your mind, but in the world around you. It builds trust, it builds skill, it builds momentum. You no longer need to be told to quit, because you're too busy building. And that's the core of Stoic practice. Redirect your mind, move your hands, use your time. Porn is not the enemy. Time wasted is. Discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. From weakness, from chaos, from regret. So every time the urge shows up, ask one thing. What can I build instead? If you train, you win. If you create, you win. If you focus, you win. And the need for escape fades, not because it's forbidden, but because it's useless. You've replaced it with something better. That's Stoicism, not talk, not theory, just action, chosen, repeated, lived. You're in a fight, not with others, with yourself. That's how the Stoics saw life, as a contest. A daily challenge between the higher self and the lower, between impulse and reason, between action and distraction. And like any battle, it needs structure, a system, a way to show up every day prepared to push forward, even when it's hard. Marcus Aurelius called this life a campaign, not a holiday. He woke each morning with one goal, to live according to nature, to meet whatever happened with calm effort, not excuses, not emotion, just execution. This mindset, seeing life as a kind of war, doesn't mean violence. It means focus. It means setting intention before the world can set it for you. You wake up and the first task isn't checking your phone, it's checking your mind. What matters today? What principle will guide you? If you expect distractions, you won't be surprised by them. If you expect the urge to return, it won't catch you. You've seen it before, you've prepared for it. That's the point of the morning ritual. The Stoics didn't leave mindset to chance, they trained it. Like a soldier trains his body, they trained attention. And they made it a habit. Every morning, review what's ahead. Every night, reflect on what passed. What did I do right? What did I avoid? What can I adjust? This reflection isn't judgment, it's correction. You're not blaming yourself, you're learning, you're collecting data. And that's why relapse isn't failure, it's feedback. You slipped, fine. Why? What came before it? Where were you? What triggered it? What did you ignore? This isn't emotion, it's analysis. A real warrior studies the field. He doesn't pretend the enemy won't strike. He expects it, and he plans his response. You missed once, you correct. You missed twice, you adjust. You missed again, you rebuild the plan. Relapse becomes a lesson, not a reason to quit. You treat it as a teacher. The event that exposed a gap. Now you fill the gap. Maybe it's timing. Maybe it's place. Maybe it's fatigue. You don't guess. You track. Because if you're serious, you don't just want to stop. You want to master it. You want to become the kind of person who doesn't need the escape. That's not a switch you flip. It's a skill you sharpen. And it starts with clarity. The mind is a battlefield, and you win by choosing your side early. Each morning, you step onto that field with a clear aim. Not vague, not broad. One rule, one anchor. It might be, no screens before noon. It might be, training comes before rest. It might be, work before internet. Whatever it is, it's chosen. That's your armor. And at night, you review it. Did you hold the line? Did you break? What helped? What hurt? The Stoics believed in reason, but they also knew reason wasn't automatic. It takes form through discipline, through daily effort. And when the urge shows up, you don't panic. You don't lie to yourself. You accept it. You say, here it is again, that same old script. You breathe, you wait, you shift attention, because you've trained for this. The craving isn't new, it's just loud, and loud doesn't mean true. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the whole mindset. The thing that blocks you is the thing that builds you. The urge isn't a sign of weakness. It's the moment you get to strengthen your response. You don't run from it, you meet it, you stand still, you say no. And that small act, done enough times, reshapes who you are. This is not punishment, it's progress. And it doesn't require motivation, just consistency, just awareness. Every day you wake up and train, you focus your aim, you watch your actions. You learn from missteps. You stop treating urges like emergencies. They're just events. They come. You see them. You stay grounded. That's the real power. And over time, you stop thinking about porn as something you're quitting. It becomes something you've moved past. Not because it disappeared, but because it no longer fits who you are. Not a man pulled by feeling, a man moved by purpose. And every day you return to that field, to fight again. Not with anger, but with order. That's the warrior mindset. That's the path. You were told freedom meant doing whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. That saying yes to every impulse was strength, that ease was success. But the Stoics knew something different. They knew real freedom wasn't about access. It was about control. Not over others, over yourself. They said if you obey every urge, you're not free. You're owned. By habit, by distraction, by impulse. And if you're owned, you can't lead, you can't create, you can't grow, you just follow. That's not freedom. That's dependence. And dependence always takes more than it gives. So you look at your life. You look at what you've allowed, what you've tolerated, what you've called normal. And you ask, was that really freedom? Or was it just comfort dressed up as choice? Because every time you choose what's easy over what's right, you give something away. Time, energy, integrity. But when you choose discipline, you keep those things. You protect them. You direct them. And you use them to build something better. Discipline is not chains. It's structure. It's the frame that holds everything up. You want to quit porn? You don't just remove it. You build a system. You learn your patterns. You track your habits. You replace time wasting with time building. You stop guessing. You start choosing. And slowly, what once felt hard becomes automatic. What felt natural becomes foreign because you've shifted, not by emotion, by repetition. The Stoic framework isn't complex. It starts with knowing what's in your control. Not the cravings, not the content, just your actions, just your attitude, just your focus. You begin the day with intention. You end it with review. You learn from relapse. You sharpen your tools. You trade reaction for direction. That's what the ancient thinkers taught. That the good life doesn't come to you. You create it, and it's quiet. Real strength isn't loud. It's not applause. It's not visible. It's silent. It's found in the man who could say yes, but doesn't. Who could escape, but stays. Who could follow, but leads himself. Every day you repeat small choices. Cold shower instead of comfort. Walk instead of scroll. Read instead of watch. Build instead of consume. Not once. Always. Not when easy. Especially when hard. And over time you start to see it. Discipline opens doors. You think clearer. You feel sharper. You act faster. You stop being controlled. You become the one who decides. Porn becomes just another thing you don't need. Not because you hate it, because you've outgrown it. Now you build relationships based on connection, not fantasy. You use your time for strength, not escape. You use energy to move, not scroll. And you feel it. Not in emotion, in action, in clarity, in direction. You've traded impulse for influence. You've traded reaction for purpose. You've traded dopamine for results, and it's permanent, because it's chosen. You are not your cravings. You are not your slip-ups. You are not your habits. You are the one who acts. You are the one who decides. You are the one who repeats the right thing until it becomes part of you. No noise, no drama, just order. Discipline builds men. Without it, nothing lasts. With it, everything improves. That's what the Stoics believed. And they didn't just write it. They lived it. Every day. Until it became who they were. So now, it's your move. Do you keep chasing freedom that costs you everything? Or do you build the kind of life where you no longer need to chase? Where your time is used, your choices are clean, your results are earned. It's not about fighting urges forever. It's about becoming the kind of man who no longer listens to them. You are not your thoughts, you are not your triggers, you are not your mood. You are the one who chooses what happens next. That's power, that's clarity, that's freedom. You've listened to this message. You've taken in the ideas, the philosophy, the tools, but none of that matters if you don't take action. You can think about the Stoics. You can talk about freedom, you can understand discipline, but none of it will change anything unless you start doing something today, right now. You have to take that first step. No waiting, no tomorrow. It starts now. The Stoics didn't wait for the perfect moment. They acted with what they had. They didn't just talk about virtue, they lived it. They didn't just think about control, they exercised it. And that's where you begin. It's not about big leaps, it's about small steps. One change today, one practice tomorrow. Start journaling. It doesn't need to be long, just write something. Ask yourself what you're trying to escape. What's the emotion you're numbing? What's the trigger you keep falling for? Write it down. Be honest with yourself. And write again tomorrow. That's how you start to learn. That's how you begin to master your actions. Begin one Stoic practice today. Maybe it's a cold shower. Maybe it's taking 5 minutes in the morning to focus your mind. Maybe it's saying no to the easy thing so you can say yes to the right thing. You don't need to do everything all at once. You just need to start. Pick something, do it, and make it a habit, one day at a time. That's how you change. The Stoics believed in control, but they didn't believe in perfection. They believed in action. And that's what you need to do now. Act. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. Porn is not your enemy. It's not something to fight against, it's a symptom, a product of a larger issue. The real enemy is ignorance, the lack of awareness, the failure to understand how your mind works, the failure to understand what freedom really means. But now you know. You've seen it, you've heard it, so choose, right now. Choose to live differently. Choose discipline. Choose to replace what you once thought was freedom with something far more powerful. Choose to master yourself. It's not easy, but it's simple. One step at a time. You've got the tools. You've got the mindset. You've got the framework. Now, you just have to do the work. That's the path. That's the way forward. And it starts today. Choose. I know you have the ability to change your life and become free from any chains holding you back. Like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Thank you for watching.